For millennia, the pyramids of Giza have stood as humanity's ultimate testament to ancient ingenuity, monumental ambition, and an enduring sense of mystery. We look at them awestruck and imagine a civilization capable of such incredible feats. We conjure images of pharaohs, scribes, and countless laborers, all working in unison to erect these colossal structures that defy modern explanation. Thousands of years ago, the Sahara was a verdant savanna, crisscrossed by rivers and teeming with wildlife. For years, it was little more than a remote barren basin. These people weren't just hunter-gatherers, were astronomical observers, capable of engineering projects on a grand scale, moving immense stones without the benefit of wheels, advanced metallurgy, or even permanent settlements as we understand them. And megalithic structures, often deeply buried or eroded by millennia of wind and sand. How were these massive stones quarried and transported without the sophisticated tools and organized labor of later dynastic periods? Constructing such monuments requires coordination, planning, and a unified vision. Elements that are the hallmarks of more complex societies. Were these places ancient temples, observatories, burial sites for revered figures? While definitive answers remain elusive, their existence forces us to reconsider the timeline of human societal development in this region. Theories range from ingenious use of natural rock formations to harnessing floodwaters for transport. The complexity of sites like Nabda Playa suggests a leap in intellectual and organizational capacity that seems to appear almost ex nihilo in the archaeological record. It raises the uncomfortable question, are we missing a crucial chapter in human history? One where advanced knowledge and skills were present far earlier than we've ever dared to imagine. These are not mere anomalies. They are direct challenges to our conventional understanding of ancient Egypt's origins. They're the first whispers from the desert, hinting at an age of giants, not just in stature, but in intellect and ambition that shaped the very cradle of civilization. But even with these explanations, the precision of the alignments and the scale of the stones remain profoundly perplexing. It hints at a society with a clear understanding of engineering principles, perhaps even a proto-scientific methodology, that we simply do not attribute to early Stone Age cultures. These discoveries are often isolated, making them difficult to connect into a coherent narrative, but cumulatively, they paint a picture of widespread prehistoric activity, not just in isolated pockets, but across a vast geographical expanse. The alignments at Nabda Playa track the summer solstice, and specific stars like Sirius, which held immense significance in later Egyptian mythology. It suggests a deeply rooted connection to the cosmos, a knowledge passed down through generations, hinting at a philosophical and perhaps even spiritual framework far more advanced than previously imagined for this period. Yet in the 1970s and 80s, archaeological expeditions began to unearth something truly extraordinary. What they found wasn't just ancient campsites, but a complex arrangement of megalithic stones, some standing, some fallen, forming precise astronomical alignments. These aren't simple piles of rocks. They are carefully placed, often shaped, stones weighing many tons. Radiocarbon dating pushed their age back, not just thousands, but tens of thousands of years, to around 7,500 to 7,000 BCE. This makes Nabda Playa older than Stonehenge by several millennia, challenging the long-held belief that complex astronomical observatories originated in Europe. It was in this fertile environment that early human communities thrived, laying the groundwork for what would eventually become one of the greatest civilizations in history. But their early achievements were not merely rudimentary settlements. Emerging evidence suggests a level of sophistication that defies conventional timelines. But what if the story we've been told, the narrative etched into our collective consciousness, is incomplete? What if long before Khufu commissioned his magnificent tomb, long before the Old Kingdom cast its shadow across the Nile, there existed an even more enigmatic epoch, a time when forces unknown shaped the very landscape of Egypt, leaving behind traces of a civilization so ancient, so utterly alien, that it challenges everything we thought we knew about the origins of human civilization. Forget what you think you know about ancient Egypt. Forget the pharaohs and their gilded sarcophagi. Today, we're journeying back, far beyond the familiar grandeur, to peel back the layers of sand and time to uncover a period shrouded in shadows, the epoch before the pyramids. We're talking about enigmatic structures that predate even the earliest dynasties, colossal figures that seem to have been abandoned mid-creation, and archaeological whispers of a sophisticated society that vanished without a trace, leaving behind only tantalizing clues. What secrets do these ancient stones hold? Who were these colossal builders? And why does mainstream history so often overlook their staggering achievements? Prepare to have your understanding of ancient Egypt, and perhaps even human history itself, fundamentally reshaped. Our journey into Egypt's deep past begins not with the familiar pyramids, but with whispers carried on the desert winds. Echoes from a time so distant it verges on the mythical. For decades, traditional archaeology has largely focused on dynastic Egypt, the era of pharaohs, hieroglyphs, and the iconic structures we recognize today. But beneath the sands, and often overlooked in plain sight, tantalizing clues to something far older, far more mysterious. We're talking about the pre-dynastic period, an epic stretching back tens of thousands of years, long before 3100 BCE, when the first unified Egyptian kingdom is traditionally said to have emerged. Imagine, if you will, a landscape vastly different from the arid desert we see today. Consider the site of Nabta Playa, deep in the Nubian desert, around 800 kilometers south of Cairo. What does this signify? It indicates that long before the dynastic Egyptians conceived of their precise calendars and cosmic alignments, an earlier culture possessed an astonishing understanding of celestial mechanics. And it's not just Nabta Playa. Throughout the desert fringes, archaeologists have sporadically stumbled upon other enigmatic stone circles. One of the most intriguing aspects of these early sites is the sheer effort involved. Furthermore, the very presence of these megaliths suggests a level of social organization and shared purpose far beyond what we typically associate with nomadic or semi-nomadic groups. Mainstream archaeology has historically struggled with these findings. They do unneatly fit into the established progression from simple hunter-gatherers to settled agriculturalists, and then to complex states. As we move closer to the cusp of the dynastic period, around 5000 to 4000 BCE, the whispers from the desert begin to take on a more concrete, yet equally perplexing form. We're talking about colossal, unfinished sculptures and monuments that lie scattered across the Egyptian landscape, predating the rise of the pharaohs and presenting a profound challenge to our understanding of ancient Egyptian capabilities. These aren't just quarry sites. These are immense works of art or engineering, seemingly abandoned mid-creation, hinting at a lost era of monumental builders whose ambitions far outstripped even those of the later pyramid constructors. Consider for a moment the traditional narrative of Egyptian monumental sculpture. These aren't just random cuts. They often show signs of being worked, shaped, and then simply ... abandoned. Why? Is it a flaw in the stone? A change in political power? Or did the builders simply lack the means to move such immense objects with the technology attributed to the later dynastic periods? While natural geological processes can cause this, some researchers propose that it could be the result of a deliberate, sophisticated. They suggest that the ambition to create monumental structures, to shape the very landscape with immense stones, was not an invention of the dynastic Egyptians, but rather a much older tradition. It hints at a pre-dynastic impulse for scale and permanence that was perhaps even grander than what followed. The question then becomes, why did this earlier, perhaps more ambitious phase of construction seemingly falter or collapse? What cataclysm, natural or otherwise, could have led to the abandonment of such colossal projects? These unfinished giants whisper tales of a lost golden age of engineering, a time when monumental ambition was not just a royal prerogative, but perhaps a widespread cultural drive leaving behind enigmatic remnants that continue to challenge the accepted timeline of human achievement, and lost technique used in stoneworking, a form of ancient machining or shaping that goes beyond simple chisels and mallets. This is, admittedly, a highly speculative theory, but it arises from the difficulty in explaining the observed phenomena with conventional archaeological explanations. The conventional explanation is that the Egyptians were masters of leverage, ramps, and sheer manpower. But the scale of some of these pre-dynastic or early dynastic unfinished works challenges the practicality of these methods alone. We are taught that it began to flourish during the Old Kingdom, with the Sphinx and the massive statues of pharaohs like Kafir. These are immense, precise cuts into granite and other hard stones, sometimes appearing as perfect straight lines or incredibly smooth surfaces, seemingly executed with a level of precision that contemporary tools could not achieve. Some theorize these could be remnants of pre-dynastic quarrying attempts for structures that were never completed or moved. The debate often revolves around the tools used: copper chisels, dolerite pounding stones. These are the accepted tools of ancient Egypt. But how could such relatively soft implements create such precise, large-scale cuts in granite, which is incredibly hard? This anomaly has led some researchers to speculate about the possibility of lost technologies or forgotten methods. The techniques involved, quarrying, roughing out, fine carving, and polishing, are well understood within the context of dynastic workshops. These aren't the finely sculpted statues of later pharaohs. They're often rough-hewn, almost cyclopean in scale, appearing as if the original artists were working on a canvas far grander than anything we attribute to the early periods. They often lack identifying features, making attribution to any known pharaoh or dynasty impossible. Their very presence begs the question: who commissioned them? And why were they left unfinished? Could these be the remnants of an earlier, more ambitious phase of monumental construction that collapsed before the dynastic era truly began? But what if there were colossal undertakings before these established periods? Projects so enormous that they dwarf even the most ambitious later works, yet remain largely unknown or attributed to later, less likely periods? One of the most striking examples can be found in the quarries and landscapes near Aswan, particularly around the famous unfinished obelisk. This obelisk, traditionally attributed to Queen Hatshepsut, is a staggering 42 meters long and, if completed, would have weighed nearly 1,200 tons. Its very existence is a marvel of ancient engineering. However, what often goes unremarked upon are the other, even larger, more enigmatic cuts and forms within the bedrock surrounding it. Some archaeologists have pointed to evidence suggesting that the initial attempts at quarrying these megastructures could predate the New Kingdom by thousands of years. The sheer scale of some of these cuts seems to belong to a different era of technology and ambition, an era when the tools available were supposedly far less sophisticated. Imagine stone blocks, partially separated from the bedrock, measuring perhaps 50, 60, or even 70 feet in length, their original purpose lost to time. Perhaps even more intriguing are the mystery cuts found in various locations, particularly in Upper Egypt. Another compelling piece of evidence lies in the colossal, weathered figures found in remote areas, seemingly abandoned before completion. Some of these unfinished works also possess a peculiar geological anomaly, a kind of vitrification or extreme hardening of the stone on their surfaces, sometimes attributed to intense heat. The implications of these colossal unfinished works are profound. When we think of the Great Sphinx of Giza, it immediately conjures images of ancient pharaohs, most notably Kafir, to whom its creation is traditionally attributed. This colossal leonine figure with a human head, carved directly from the bedrock, is an undeniable marvel of engineering and artistry. However, a growing body of evidence, both geological and archaeological, suggests that the Sphinx might be far, far older than previously believed, potentially pushing its origins back into the very pre-dynastic period, re-exploring, perhaps even tens of thousands of years before Kafir's reign. Before that, however, specifically between roughly 10,000 and 5,000 BCE, the region experienced a green Sahara period, characterized by significant rainfall and a more savanna-like environment. A culture capable of quarrying and shaping enormous blocks of limestone, of conceptualizing and executing a sculpture of unprecedented scale, and perhaps even possessing a complex symbolic language that gave birth to the very concept of the Sphinx. However, Schoch and his supporters counter, particularly when compared to other structures on the Giza Plateau that are known to be from the dynastic period and exhibit primarily wind and sand erosion. The debate remains fierce, highlighting the tension between traditional archaeological consensus and new interdisciplinary interpretations. It points to a highly organized, technologically capable, and perhaps even spiritually advanced culture. Was it a guardian of an ancient, now-lost civilization? A marker of astronomical significance? A colossal effigy of a forgotten deity or an early, powerful ruler? Its silent gaze across the desert holds secrets that could redefine the very dawn of civilization in Egypt. The geological argument for an older sphinx is not just an academic curiosity. It's a profound challenge to our understanding of human history, inviting us to look beyond the established narratives and consider the possibility of giants in intellect and endeavor who walked the earth long before the age of the pyramids. The Sphinx, in this light, becomes not merely a dynastic monument, but a colossal, enigmatic key to unlocking a hidden chapter of our past. They would have possessed not only the raw manpower, but also the astronomical, engineering, and artistic knowledge to undertake such a colossal project. It aligns with the emerging picture from Nabta Playa, a pre-existing advanced understanding of the cosmos and monumental construction. Thousands of years before the pharaohs took the stage, this is precisely the kind of pre-dynastic giant that challenges our conventional understanding of history. Shaka's geological analysis suggested that the Sphinx must have been exposed to this wet climate for a considerable period to develop the observed erosion patterns. It's built from massive cyclopean limestone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons. It's often dressed with incredible precision, but lacking any inscriptions or clear dynastic markers. Its construction style is remarkably similar to the Valley Temple of Kafir, but the sheer scale of the blocks and the absence of decorative elements have led some to suggest it might also belong to an earlier, undocumented phase of construction. This would place its construction not in 2500 BCE, but potentially as far back as 7000 to 5000 BCE, if not even earlier. The disproportionately small head of the Sphinx compared to its massive body has long been a subject of discussion. Some theories suggest the original head might have been something different, perhaps a lion, its head that was later recarved into a human visage by an Old Kingdom pharaoh to reflect his own image. If true, this recarving would have made the head smaller relative to the weathered body, further supporting the idea of a much older original structure. Such a dating would make the Sphinx thousands of years older than the earliest pyramids and predates the accepted timeline for any known civilization capable of such monumental construction. This radical redating would fundamentally rewrite the timeline of Egyptian civilization and monumental construction. The traditional archaeological view posits that the Sphinx was carved during the Old Kingdom, specifically around 2500 BCE, as part of Khafre's mortuary complex. This attribution is primarily based on its proximity to Khafre's pyramid and temple, and a damaged inscription on a stele between the Sphinx's paws that mentions Kafir, though it doesn't explicitly state he built the Sphinx. For decades, this dating was largely unchallenged. Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University, ignited a massive debate by pointing to the extensive erosion patterns visible on the body of the Sphinx enclosure. Schoch observed that the primary form of erosion on the Sphinx's body and the walls of its enclosure is vertical weathering, characterized by deep, undulating fissures. This type of erosion, he argued, is characteristic of prolonged exposure to heavy, consistent rainfall, not the gentle wind and sand erosion that defines the current hyperarid climate of the Giza Plateau. Egypt, as we know it today, has been largely desert for the last 5,000 years. Think about the implications. If the Sphinx was carved 7,000 to 9,000 years ago, it means a highly sophisticated culture existed in Egypt long before the pharaohs. Mainstream Egyptologists have largely resisted this redating, offering alternative explanations for the erosion, such as localized flooding or the effects of rising groundwater. Beyond the geological evidence, other intriguing points support an earlier origin. Furthermore, the Sphinx Temple, located directly in front of the Sphinx, also exhibits curious anomalies. What kind of society could have created such a monument in the pre-dynastic era? If the Sphinx truly is a pre-dynastic sentinel, what was its original purpose? While the desert holds whispers of pre-dynastic giants, the very lifeblood of ancient Egypt, the Nile River, undoubtedly holds its own submerged secrets. For millennia, the Nile has been a dynamic force, shaping the landscape, nurturing civilizations, and also occasionally claiming them. These were not fixed permanent metropolises like later dynastic cities. They were often evolving communities, adapting to the river's whims. During the end of the last ice age and through subsequent interglacial periods, global sea levels rose significantly. The deep silt layers and the lack of visibility. They are tantalizing clues and discoveries that hint at their existence. Sites like Marimd Beni Salama, located on the western edge of the Nile Delta, date back to around 5000 to 4000 BCE, revealing sophisticated early agricultural communities with organized housing and burial practices. These lakes were once part of ancient Nile branches or vast lagoons connected to the Mediterranean. If these areas once held fertile land or deltaic islands during earlier, wetter periods, they could conceivably conceal extremely ancient settlements that were eventually submerged as water levels rose or the landscape changed. The sheer scale of these bodies of water makes systematic archaeological survey incredibly difficult. But the potential for discovery is immense. The river, which gave life to ancient Egypt, also serves as a silent tomb for its earliest manifestations. Unearthing these forgotten settlements would not only fill significant gaps in our understanding of the pre-dynastic period, but could also reveal unknown technologies, unexpected social complexities, and perhaps even monumental achievements that predate the familiar narrative of pharaohs and pyramids, challenging us to imagine a far richer and older tapestry of civilization along the banks of the mighty Nile. While not submerged, their existence points to a widespread and developed pre-dynastic presence that was highly dependent on the ever-changing Nile environment. Occasionally, during deep excavations for modern infrastructure projects, or when water levels are unusually low, startlingly old artifacts or structural remnants are unearthed from improbable depths. These discoveries are often isolated and difficult to contextualize, but they suggest a vast, largely unexplored archaeological landscape beneath the modern one. While many of these are known to contain layers from later dynastic periods, it's not uncommon for the lowest, deepest layers to reach back into the pre-dynastic, sometimes even Neolithic periods. Underwater archaeology in a dynamic riverine environment like the Nile is exponentially more difficult than on land. The constant shifting of sediment, the powerful currents, and the sheer volume of water make systematic exploration a monumental task. Yet the reward could be revolutionary. Insights into the very origins of Egyptian social structure, agriculture, belief systems, and even early forms of writing or monumental architecture that developed long before the unified kingdom. These deeper levels are incredibly difficult to excavate due to waterlogging and depth, meaning that the full extent of their earliest occupations is often only partially explored. What lies beneath these deepest explored levels? The potential for discovering hitherto unknown aspects of early Egyptian life, and even monumental structures from forgotten eras remain significant. The Nile Delta, in particular, would have been a dynamic, ever-changing environment. Early pre-dynastic settlements, located closer to the ancient Mediterranean coastline, or within the lower delta region, would have been highly susceptible to inundation. Imagine bustling communities, perhaps with sophisticated early infrastructure, now lying thousands of years deep beneath the sediment of what is now agricultural land or even modern cities built on top of ancient layers. Over thousands of years, as the Nile meandered, as sea levels rose and fell, and as natural disasters like catastrophic floods occurred, settlements could be slowly submerged, buried, or simply washed away, leaving little trace on the visible surface. As the river has shifted its course, flooded and receded over thousands of years, it's highly probable that entire settlements, once thriving hubs of early human activity, now lie hidden beneath layers of silt, mud, and water, their existence forgotten by history. These are the lost cities of the pre-dynastic era, potentially holding the keys to understanding the development of early Egyptian society. Consider the nature of early settlements in Egypt. People congregated along the fertile banks of the Nile, where water was abundant and agriculture could flourish. One of the most intriguing aspects of this concept is the impact of rising sea levels. While finding entire submerged pre-dynastic cities within the Nile itself presents immense archaeological challenges, the river's currents. For example, archaeologists have found evidence of extremely ancient settlements at the edges of the ancient Nile floodplain, far from where the river flows today, indicating significant shifts in the river's course over millennia. Even more speculative, but equally fascinating, are the theories surrounding the possibility of structures or settlements. Deep beneath the Great Bitter Lakes or Lake Manzala in the Suez Canal region, consider also the numerous tell sites found across the delta. The challenge, of course, is both logistical and financial. These lost cities and submerged secrets aren't just romantic notions. They are a logical consequence of the Nile's dynamic history. If the pre-dynastic era truly hosted giants of intellect and ambition, then the logical next question is, how did they achieve such monumental feats? How did they quarry, move, and precisely shape stones weighing tens or even hundreds of tons? Thousands of years before the invention of the wheel, advanced metallurgy, or widespread organized labor as we understand it from the dynastic periods. This question lies at the heart of the lost technology debate and forces us to consider the possibility of unconventional techniques that have been lost to history. Mainstream archaeology offers well-established theories for dynastic construction: copper chisels, dolerite-pounding stones, wooden mallets, ropes, ramps, and immense manpower. For smaller blocks and softer stones, these methods are demonstrably effective, as a hand-turned drill would produce, but rather perfectly cylindrical with a core that was removed. While ramps and sledges are well documented, moving blocks weighing hundreds of tons over significant distances, often uphill or over uneven terrain, requires a level of engineering and mechanics that borders on the incredible even for the dynastic Egyptians. To align structures with astronomical phenomena, or to ensure that colossal blocks fit together with precision, demands sophisticated mathematical and surveying knowledge. This includes ideas of, this is speculative, but it arises from the difficulty in explaining the movement of truly massive stones. Did these early communities possess a rudimentary form of geometry or trigonometry that allowed them to scale up their designs and execute them with such accuracy? Or not carved, but actually cast from an early form of geopolymer concrete, a type of synthetic stone made from natural materials. The persistent mystery surrounding how these ancient master builders achieved their feats encourages us to keep an open mind, to continue investigating, and to perhaps discover that the ingenuity of humanity, even in its earliest forms, was far greater and more varied than we currently understand. The unconventional techniques of these colossal builders remain one of the most compelling enigmas of Egypt's deep past. If applicable to earlier periods, this could explain the precision and apparent ease of manipulation for some structures, though the geological evidence for this theory remains highly debated. The existence of sites like Nabta Playa certainly suggests a deep understanding of celestial mechanics, and it's not a stretch to imagine this knowledge extending to terrestrial engineering. But inheritors of a much older global civilization that possessed advanced knowledge and technology, much of which was lost in a catastrophic event. The enigmatic ruins, the colossal unfinished works, and the out-of-place artifacts could then be explained as remnants of this forgotten antecedent. If these pre-dynastic builders were moving equally massive stones without the benefit of a fully developed state apparatus and its associated organized labor force, it suggests they must have employed highly ingenious, perhaps even unique methods. Could they have understood principles of acoustics to levitate objects, as suggested by some fringe theories? Or employed a form of forgotten earth-moving technique using water pressure or counterweights on a scale we do uncomprehend? Furthermore, some of these holes show a distinct feed rate, the rate at which the drill bit moved through the material, that seems too fast for manual effort. These types of marks are typically associated with power tools, while some argue that these can be explained by specific forms of hand drilling with abrasive sand. The consistency and depth of some of these features continue to puzzle engineers and toolmakers. However, when we look at the colossal scale and precision of some pre-dynastic or very early dynastic works, particularly in hard granites and basalts, these explanations begin to strain credulity. Let's revisit the concept of precision cutting in incredibly hard stones. Throughout Egypt, particularly at sites like the Serapeum at Saqqara, or in certain enigmatic cuts at Giza, one finds evidence of cuts and surfaces that appear remarkably flat, smooth, and geometrically precise. These aren't just rough-hewn blocks. They exhibit characteristics often associated with advanced machining: incredibly straight lines, perfect angles, and surfaces with tolerances that seem to defy the capabilities of hand tools made of softer materials. Take, for instance, the boxes of the Serapeum. These massive granite and basalt sarcophagi weighing up to 100 tons are finished with an astounding degree of precision, their inner and outer surfaces incredibly flat, and their corners perfectly square. Some engineers have performed analyses suggesting that to achieve such precision with copper tools would require an impossibly long time and an astronomical number of man-hours, and still might not yield the observed flatness. This has led to speculation about the use of large unknown tools or perhaps even a method of abrasion that was far more efficient than simple grinding. Could these giants have possessed a lost understanding of materials science? Perhaps harnessing abrasive slurries or even some form of rotary cutting on an unprecedented scale? Another highly debated anomaly is the presence of drill holes that appear to have been made with a drill bit that was not conical. The sheer difficulty of transporting truly massive stones also needs reevaluation. Furthermore, the very concept of pre-planning and surveying for monumental projects in the pre-dynastic era requires a rethink. Some of the more radical theories propose that the unconventional techniques might have involved knowledge far beyond what we typically attribute to Stone Age or early Bronze Age cultures. Acoustic levitation. While highly controversial and lacking direct archaeological evidence, some proponents suggest ancient cultures might have understood how to manipulate sound frequencies to reduce the perceived weight of objects. Geopolymer concrete, pioneered by Joseph David Ovitz. This theory suggests some stone blocks lost knowledge from a pre-cataclysmic civilization. This more esoteric idea posits that the giants of the pre-dynastic era were not simply early Egyptians. While many of these ideas remain outside mainstream acceptance, they highlight the very real challenge that certain pre-dynastic and early dynastic anomalies pose to conventional explanations. We've explored the tantalizing evidence of a pre-dynastic era marked by colossal ambition, its advanced astronomical knowledge, and seemingly unconventional building techniques. But if these giants, whether individual rulers, a distinct civilization, or simply a particularly ingenious phase of early Egyptian culture, were so advanced, why did they seemingly vanish, leaving only enigmatic traces before the familiar dynastic period began? What caused this vanishing act, and why does their story remain largely outside the conventional historical narrative? There are several plausible explanations, ranging from well-accepted archaeological theories to more speculative, yet compelling, alternative hypotheses. Firstly, the climatic shift is a major contributing factor. Pre-dynastic sites are often deeply buried under thousands of years of sediment, making them incredibly difficult to locate and excavate. Many early settlements were made of perishable materials like mud brick, wood, and reeds, which do not survive the millennia, as well as stone. It wasn't necessarily a single event, but a multifaceted process. By actively seeking out and reevaluating these overlooked anomalies, we begin to reconstruct a more nuanced and perhaps far older narrative of human ingenuity in the cradle of civilization. We've seen tantalizing evidence of a period where colossal ambition, profound astronomical knowledge, and possibly even lost technologies shaped the very landscape of ancient Egypt. From the precise megalithic circles of Nabda and Playa, older than Stonehenge, by millennia, to the geological whispers on the Great Sphinx, suggesting an age far more ancient than conventionally accepted. The legacy of these forgotten predecessors isn't etched in hieroglyphs on royal tombs, but in the very bedrock of the desert itself, in the silent, weathered stones that defy conventional explanation. As new archaeological techniques emerge and old evidence is re-examined with fresh eyes, perhaps one day we will fully uncover the astonishing truth of the civilization that truly laid the groundwork, not just for the pyramids, but for the very concept of monumental achievement. Until then, these pre-dynastic giants stand as a testament to the enduring mysteries of our past, urging us to question, to explore, and to always seek the untold stories hidden beneath the surface of history. To the unfinished cyclopean sculptures that lie abandoned across the landscape, we've encountered the ghostly presence of forgotten master builders.
Ow.
Their disappearance serves as a powerful reminder that history is not a static, linear progression, but a dynamic, often discontinuous tapestry, with countless threads lost to the sands of time, waiting to be rediscovered. The environmental pressures of desiccation, pushed populations towards the Nile, leading to increased competition and the eventual rise of unified states. As these states consolidated power earlier, disparate cultural traditions may have been marginalized or absorbed. They compel us to ask, who were these pre-dynastic giants? What was their true capability? And what secrets did they take with them when their time in the sun seemingly ended? The answers remain elusive, obscured by millennia of shifting sands, the relentless march of geological time, and perhaps even the selective telling of history. What remains are the enigmatic traces, the Sphinx's erosion, the unfinished colossal cuts, the astronomical alignments of Nabta Playa, challenging us to reconsider the linearity of history. Furthermore, the very activity of later dynastic builders often involved recycling earlier materials or building directly on top of older sites, effectively burying and destroying evidence of what came before. Much of the vanishing act might simply be a matter of what has survived the ravages of time and what archaeologists have managed to find. As discussed earlier, the Green Sahara period, which fostered early communities, began to transition into a hyper-arid desert around 5000 to 4000 BCE. While less common than gradual climatic change, localized but devastating floods, earthquakes, or even rare comet impacts, if these giants possessed truly unconventional techniques. Perhaps even a proto-scientific understanding that was not easily replicable or widely disseminated, that knowledge might have been held by a select few. If that elite perished or their traditions were intentionally dismantled by a new regime, that specialized knowledge could have simply been lost. Imagine a world where the secrets of monumental stoneworking or astronomical prediction were guarded by a specific priesthood or craftsman guild. If that lineage was broken, the knowledge could disappear with it. Could have wiped out significant settlements or disrupted societal structures to such an extent that recovery of large-scale endeavors became impossible. Such events could explain sudden breaks in the archaeological record and the abandonment of colossal projects. The pre-dynastic period, particularly the Naqada cultures, saw increasing social complexity, the rise of powerful regional centers, and eventually, the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. This process was likely not entirely peaceful. Competition for resources, warfare between emerging city-states, and the eventual triumph of one ruling elite could have led to the suppression or assimilation of earlier traditions and knowledge. Conquering powers often reshape history to legitimize their own rule, potentially downplaying or erasing the achievements of their predecessors. The giants might not have vanished entirely, but their distinct cultural identity and monumental practices could have been absorbed, altered, or simply overshadowed by the new, dominant political order. This gradual but inexorable desiccation would have had a profound impact on populations. As water sources dwindled and fertile lands receded, communities would have been forced to migrate, leading to population displacement, fragmentation, and potentially the collapse of widespread interconnected societies. Large-scale projects, which require significant resources and stable populations, would become unsustainable in such an environment. A once thriving cultural landscape might have simply faded away as its ecological foundation eroded. Secondly, internal social and political restructuring cannot be overlooked. Thirdly, the nature of archaeological preservation and discovery itself plays a significant role. Fourthly, the possibility of catastrophic natural events cannot be entirely dismissed. Finally, and perhaps most speculatively, is the idea of lost knowledge or deliberate suppression. The vanishing act of these pre-dynastic giants is likely a complex interplay of these factors. Ultimately, the mystery of why these giants seemingly disappeared is intertwined with the question of their very existence. The journey we've taken today, back through the sands of time, the epoch before the pyramids, challenges us to look beyond the familiar and embrace the enigmatic. These aren't just isolated anomalies. They are a collective invitation to reconsider the very foundations of human civilization in this storied land. But one thing is clear. The narrative of ancient Egypt is far richer, far deeper, and far more mysterious than the traditional accounts suggest.